The Sunfallen Road, Chapter 4. So you see, while vampires are a scattered lot, we still have to have a system of government. Otherwise, chaos would reign, and the balance we maintain between vampire and humankind would be lost, said the regent. Do you understand all I have told you? I nodded. Most of all, you must be careful when you go out to hunt. Be not known by humans. Be careful not to kill, and if you must kill, hide your tracks. But it is better to take a little from many humans than much from one. Some vampires have special servants, as I do, that provide blood daily to us in return for special favor. Do they want to become vampires? Some do, he said, but some simply do it out of a desire to have food to eat, clothes to wear, and a house to call their own. It is a small payment for so much, what they give. We sustain one another. I nodded. I didn't like it much, but by the same token, it made sense, too. I don't want to be a monster, Your Grace. Nor need you be, said the regent, smiling and pouring me another glass. I never wanted to be a monster, but my creator took me just as yours did, without considering my choice. It is hard not to look at humans as anything but food, but nevertheless, they are valuable, and their wants and needs deserve no less consideration than ours. You will meet many vampires and regents who do not feel that way, but that is what I believe. I smiled at him, and he smiled back. I'm glad of that, Your Grace, I said, taking another sip from my glass. The blood moved through my body, warming me, making me feel stronger. You may call me Klaus when we are in private, he said. I was not born a regent nor nobility. To this day, the titles still surprise me. I laughed for the first time in many days. Thank you, Klaus. The Shire would not have chosen you if you did not have some type of affliction, however, said Klaus. I would know what it is. I hesitated. I didn't feel any compulsion to tell him as I had with Deshaya. I learned later that compulsion was one of her talents. But I knew very well, all the same, that I had to tell Klaus, whether I wanted to or not. As if to reassure me, he rested his hand on mine and smiled gently, as if to tell me that my secret would be safe with him and he would not judge me. I hear voices, I said finally, speaking in a low voice. And sometimes I see things that may or may not be real. He said, twisting the stem of his glass in his fingers. Have you considered that maybe you are hearing other people's thoughts or seeing what exists elsewhere? I thought about this for a moment. No. Many visionaries have been deemed mad because of their gifts, said the regent. It could go one way or the other, I suppose, but it may be that you are not mad. Regardless, you seem quite well put together to me. I suspect you have fought to control your madness rather than letting it control you. I never wanted to be mad, I said simply, finishing my glass and setting it back on the tray. No one ever does, said Klaus. But I have a post open in the court that I think you may be a good fit for. I looked at him with interest. What is it? He explained to me that most courts have an emissary, a person that goes as envoy to other courts to visit regents and other powerful vampires, and to conduct research on vampire-human relations in order to better uphold the Dark Masque of being unknown to humankind. Those of the River Clan traditionally held this position, for reasons of their quick intellect and speech. He felt that, with my learning and personality, that I would be a good fit for this role, and asked me if I would take on the position. I hesitated. But what about my family, my work in the city? He said, gently, you are no longer human. You must leave it behind now. I covered my mouth, certain I was about to weep. Never seeing my parents again? My sisters? I couldn't bear it. I turned my face away, not wanting him to see my tears. I heard him rise from his chair, and a few seconds later I felt his hands on my shoulders. Melpomene, I am sorry this happened to you, but you must make a new life now and make the best of it that you can. I wiped tears away and lowered my hands, and was surprised to see that they were bloody. He took my right palm and carefully wiped it clean with his handkerchief, taking my bloody tears from my skin. The past must lie where it is, he said, and I thought, almost sadly, look to the future. After I'd left Klaus, I went back to the room Maria had brought me to, and I sat on the bed and thought. There didn't seem to be much else to do. I couldn't go home, but I wasn't sure if I should stay either. Wake up, the logical part of my brain screamed at me. You're here with a vampire regent who is offering you a job instead of killing you outright. Why shouldn't you stay? The emotional side screamed, because I don't belong here. I'm not a monster. I don't belong among monsters. Except I was a monster. I was one of those hungering things that stalked the night that all the stories talked about. Even Stoker couldn't have dreamed us up, not really. I got up and looked around my room. There were windows open on the still dark night, but I could see shutters, broad, thick wooden ones ready to be closed, and heavy drapes. The sun was our enemy. That was lesson number 1. The sun burned us to ash. No one really knew why, but the theory was that because we were dead and the sun gave life, we were like cordwood for the bonfire that was Earth's star. I closed the shutters and the drapes, for dawn was only a few hours away. I couldn't believe that in one night my entire life had turned upside down. I began to be angry. Angry at Deshaya, angry at the men who had brought me here. I almost wished they'd left me to the sun's rays and suffer this nightmare. But of course, having died before, I was afraid to die again. I was afraid to die painfully. So until the day came that I might be ready, I'd have to go on being this thing that I was now. I screamed. I couldn't contain my grief or my anger. I went on screaming until Maria rushed into the room and found me huddled on the floor, holding my head between my hands. She picked me up and slapped my face, lightly but smartly. I stopped immediately, shocked into silence. "Stop, Melpomene. That will not help you," she said, staring at me and gripping my shoulders. I was crying more bloody tears. I would die. I cannot live like this. You don't. All the ways in which we can are most painful. She took out a handkerchief, wiped away my bloody tears. "Come, you need to drink again." She fetched me a servant who had marks all over his body, on his wrist, his arms, his neck. Still, he looked healthy enough, and he held out his one unmarked wrist to me. I looked at Maria. "Don't worry, I will be here to stop you," she said. "Drink." I seized the wrist and bit down, but not hard, for I didn't really want to hurt the man. But not too gently either, for I'd cried out some of the blood I'd had earlier, and I was thirsty yet again. After a minute or two, Maria drew me away. She handed the servant a towel, who pressed it to his wrist as he left the room. I sat on the bed and closed my eyes. I felt a little calmer, although not by much. Maria sat next to me for a few moments and put her arm around my shoulder. I leaned my head against her, and in a surprising gesture of maternal comfort, she kissed the side of my head. "His Grace would have you come and formally present yourself and mingle with the citizens of the court in the hours before dawn," she said gently. "Will you come?" I nodded. "Also, have you accepted His Grace's offer?" "I have to think about it," I muttered. "Too much has changed today." She nodded knowingly. "In the meantime, don't worry. You will be safe here, at least for now." She led me downstairs and back to the drawing room. I entered cautiously, and Klaus smiled when he saw me. I curtsied before him. "I, Melpomene Aguilar, of the River Clan, present myself to the Regent of Berlin, and offer my talents and loyalty for as long as I remain a citizen of his domain." Every vampire, or almost every vampire, belongs to a bloodline, and these bloodlines have certain characteristics. The River Clan was known for their keen and quick intelligence, but also their unpredictable ways. Many of them were scholars, and just as many of them were mad. The Gold Clan was mainly composed of nobles and gentry. The Forest Clan, typically artisans and craftspeople. The Prosaics were poets and artists, and the Sirens were musicians. There had to be about 20 of these clans, perhaps more, and Klaus had explained them to me carefully. I was of the River clan, which is why Klaus had called me Riverian when I had first entered his house. The regent smiled. Rise, Miss Aguilar, you are welcome. My friends, welcome Melpomene as you would any other, and make your friendship hers. I rose to my feet, and a man with blonde hair and hazel eyes approached me. He was dressed richly but simply, and he extended his hand to me. Rudolf Abendroth of the Siren clan, he said, smiling lightly. The Siren clan. I recalled that the Sirens were musicians. What do you play, Herr Abendroth? I asked him. I'm a violinist, he said. I smiled. Although I wasn't a musician by any stretch of the imagination, I loved violin concertos. My parents had been fond of them and took us often to classical concerts, particularly believing music to be an important part of our education and refinement. My smile dropped a little, but I managed to say, "It is a pleasure to meet you." Many of the vampires introduced themselves to me and made light conversation, but there was something in the tone of what many of them said that indicated they did not think I would long have the regent's favor, and maybe I might even go the same way that Deshaya did. Because of my creator's bad seed, I might turn out to be a rebel, and it remained only to see how destructive I might be, especially given my bloodline's reputation. I didn't care. They could think what they wanted. I didn't care for their loyalties, and I didn't need them. I would be loyal to the people that earned it. If the regent did, I'd give it to him. If he didn't, then I would leave. It was as simple as that, but I was to learn that in this dark new world I inhabited, nothing was really simple.